Thanks everybody for being here. I'm Reid Johnston. I am the co-founder and CIO at Teal, and we are a technology company. Our office is just a couple of blocks away. We work with small businesses around the country providing managed technology service. We focus on the Microsoft stack, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Specifically, as we talk about AI, we're going to be talking about Microsoft solutions. So I'm going to cover the number of different copilots that Microsoft offers. We're going to talk about how it works and some security considerations. I'm going to jump into a demo of Copilot on the web, in Word, PowerPoint, and Teams. We'll talk about prompting best practice, and I'll show you guys Copilot Lab. We'll have a Q&A, and then we're going to do a drawing for 1 year of Copilot for Microsoft 365, so a license of that. And then we'll get into why you all are here, which is the tasting, which is right next door. So to get started, Microsoft has so many different Copilots. There is Copilot on the web, and that's the first thing I'll show. There is Copilot for Microsoft 365. That is their product that lets you interact with your data. There is Copilot Studio, which lets you quickly, using low code or no code, write your own interactive chatbots that use AI and also can talk to your data. And then there's Azure AI Studio, which is basically the platform that sits behind everything, but using Azure AI Studio, you can build your own AI large language models and interact with other data sets outside of your Microsoft tenant. So the reason that we are such a proponent of Copilot is because of the security protections that are in place as part of your Microsoft tenant. Takes me into this great drawing of how this all works. So I'm going to show my laser pointer. So Copilot is not the AI. Copilot is really the air traffic controller, so to speak. So when you use Copilot, either on the web or in one of the applications, Copilot is taking your prompt, it's taking what you are feeding it, and it's asking the Microsoft Graph, which is the information that Microsoft has about you and your files and what you have access to, and it's expanding that request. It's then taking that expanded request and it's sending it into the large language model in Azure. Azure is processing it, and then it sends it back to the Microsoft Graph, where that response is then compared to what you have access to. It's grounded in information that you have in your tenant, and then it is returned to you in the form of a response. So Copilot is like that air traffic controller routing the information all over the place. So it happens very quickly too. For as many different places as it's bouncing around and the data that's being consumed, it's very quick. The next thing I want to share is some stats that were found during the review that Microsoft did when they released Copilot to large enterprise. You can see here that many of the respondents that were surveyed said Copilot has helped us. They said 70% said they're more productive. In the 80s, said it's easier to get started on a first draft with documents that they're writing. High 80s said Copilot helped them be more productive with their meetings. High percentages said it was very helpful to helping them find their information. So many organizations have found that Copilot is very helpful. So next, we're going to get right into a demo, and I'm going to show some examples of how you can use Copilot in your organization. I'm going to switch to my browser and make sure that you can see my browser. Go like this. There we go. Okay. So the first thing that I want to show is Copilot for the web. So we're at copilot.microsoft.com. And I'm just going to refresh my page to make sure that we're there. So the first thing I want to call out is when you're using Copilot, Microsoft loves to share that they are protecting your data. So when you're using ChatGPT from OpenAI, it's free. Well, the cost of free is your data. With Microsoft, you are paying for Copilot. So the subscription that you have with Microsoft, they are protecting your data. They're not using the information that you type in to train the model. They're not combining your information with others. They're protecting the data that you put in. So here I'm at copilot.microsoft.com, and I have a box that I can type in a prompt. So one of the things that Copilot is very useful in doing is searching through the mine of data that you have. We're very used to using a search box to type the name of a file, maybe the type of a file. But if I need to try to find something that I was talking with someone about, the search box in my file explorer doesn't do a very good job of that. So in Copilot, I can give it a prompt and I can ask for information within my tenant. So I can say, there's a slash command that lets me bring up people in my organization, files in my organization, meetings that I've had, emails that I've had. So I can start typing someone's name and I can say, where did Gar, who's one of my business partners, talk about his MPD? Now, MPD is a term that we use called Member Performance Dashboard. It's a business term that we use in this peer group that we're in. And Copilot is now scanning through our entire Microsoft tenant, and it's finding where Gar and I talked about the MPD. Not only is it finding it and responding with some information, but it's also giving me references of exactly the information that it found, so I know that what it's giving me here is grounded in my own data. So right now with Copilot, we are looking at my own data. I can start a new chat and I can also ask for other data. So I can say, well, what is our PTO policy from our Teal employee handbook? So now Copilot is going to go through our SharePoint, it's going to go through emails, and it's going to find where our handbook is. I don't know where it is. It's in one of our team's sites. And it's going to retrieve information from that handbook. So there we go. So clarified in a 2022 document. For further details, you may refer to the Teal Employee Handbook, modified July 13th. And it gave me references. So it gave me a response, and it also gave me the references of where it got that information so that I know that the information that it gave me is valid. So that, yeah, that's all right. Yeah. Very good question. So short answer is yes. If you ask it an open-ended question and you have multiple handbooks, it's not going to know which handbook you're talking about. Yeah, it would. Yep. Any that you would have access to. Yep. So what I did is the prompt that I gave it was kind of a leading prompt, because I know that we have lots of employee handbook versions and files. So I said Teal Employee Handbook to help narrow it down, because I knew what I was looking for. But yeah, you can ask open-ended questions for sure. Yep. The other thing that Copilot is very useful in doing is summarizing information. So I'm not going to try to summarize a 40-page employee handbook, but if I have a document that is laid out very well, that's long, I may want to summarize that. So one document that I'm going to refer to during our presentation here quite a bit is our 11-point IT security checklist. So I can say summarize this for me, and I can use that / command. And here's that 11-point IT security checklist that I was working with earlier today. It found it because I opened it 2 hours ago. So it's related to the work I'm doing. And I can hit send, and now it's going to open up that document, and it's going to read it, and it's going to give me a simple summary of the content in the document. We'll let it do that. Pretty neat. And we'll take this to the next level when we look at how we use PowerPoint with Copilot. So we've talked about searching information. We've talked about some summarization. We can also use Copilot through the web to create content. So I can say, create a short LinkedIn post about this document. Now, Copilot, from its training, is going to know what LinkedIn is. It's going to know that a short LinkedIn post is short, not pages long. It's going to take the context from my document, and it's going to embed it into a social media post, which was actually pretty good. So we're using Copilot, and we're using ChatGPT at Teal for content creation, to take documents that our marketing team has done a great job of writing and distill it down into short summarization that may contain certain keywords or may contain certain focuses to then publish. So that's a use case for us. So let's jump out of the web and let's jump into an application like Microsoft Word. I'm just going to open up a blank document. So when you open a new document in Microsoft Word, now this is the application that's installed on my machine, but you could be on the web. You could be using Word online as well. I'm just using the desktop application that's on my machine. When I open up a blank document, right away there's a prompt for me to use Copilot where I can create a draft of a document. So I'm going to do that. So I'm going to say, create a short meeting agenda where we'll discuss, and then here I can use my / command, and Copilot is going to understand that I was just looking at this 11-point checklist, so I might want to be doing something else with it. I can click this document and click generate. Now Copilot will generate a first draft of a meeting agenda. Take it a second and we'll see what it looks like. While it's doing that, you'll notice at the top bar there's also a Copilot button, and all of the applications that Microsoft has embedded Copilot, they're putting a Copilot button in the toolbar, so it's usually in the upper right corner. That button will open up a side panel, and that side panel will let you interact with the content that you're looking at in that application. I don't have it configured on my machine today, but if you're using Copilot within your browser, Copilot can actually look at the website that you're looking at and do some summarization and data gathering from that website, which is really powerful. But here I gave a quick prompt, give me a meeting agenda. So here it drafted a sample meeting agenda, attendees, objectives, simple agenda, preparation. Now, if I wanted to, I could ask it to clarify or make some changes. I could say, please remove the preparation section, and it could do that for me. We'll let it refine the draft. And I said, please, like I'm being nice, like I'm talking to a person, but I'm talking to the AI. It'll give me this draft, and then if I like it, I can say keep it, and now I have a document that I can work with that very quickly I can modify. I don't know who these attendees are. I'm going to remove those, but now I've got sections that I can use for a meeting agenda. So that's pretty useful. I'm going to also open up that 11-point security checklist again, just to show you guys how you'd summarize a document within Microsoft Word. So we'll let that open. So here's our 11-point IT security checklist. This was the document that our marketing team built. I'm going to go into the Copilot side panel, and it's going to give me some different prompt ideas at the bottom, but I can say, summarize this for me. And I've got a spelling mistake in my word summarize, but Copilot is going to understand the intent of the request that I made. So it's working on it, putting things together. Almost there. And there's our first glitch. It took a little while, but we finally had a glitch. So it says, I can't work with that. Try making a new request. Let's try it again. There we go. Summarize this document, and it gave me a nice bulleted list of what the document contains, including citations of where the bullets are coming from. So that's how you can use Copilot within an application to interrogate the data that you're looking at. So now let's move into PowerPoint. And PowerPoint, I think, is one of the most useful use cases with Copilot. Again, we have this nice document that's laid out really well. It has a lot of content, but I may want to turn this into a presentation. And Microsoft doesn't have a great way of taking a document and turning it into a presentation. So if I open PowerPoint, do that real quick here. We're going to open up a blank presentation, and I can go into my Copilot side panel, and I can say, let's create a presentation, and I'm going to use that / command again and find my 11-point security checklist. Right there. So Copilot will now read that Word document that really doesn't have any graphics or anything, and it's going to create a presentation that I can very easily modify for the use case that I might have. So here it's going through, and you can see it's creating those slides. Adding speaker notes even based on the data that's in the document. And here we go. So now I have a 16-slide presentation from that document. It's got an agenda that lists the different points. It's got an introduction, and it has a slide for each point that we're making in that document. Now, it also found images. What's a security document without someone wearing a hood? But it found public use images that it could embed into the presentation. I can go into PowerPoint Designer and pick from lots of different slide formats to make it look more like I may want it to look. So that's really, really quick to be able to create a first draft of a presentation. What I would do with this is I would take a template that we would have for Teal, and I would apply that to this presentation. So I have my logo on it, and I have my color style. But it would have taken me quite a long time to build a presentation of 15, 16 slides, for sure. The part that is also very useful is it gave me speaker notes for each slide. So if I'm doing a presentation, I can see those notes during that time. Pretty neat. If I go back into Copilot and I want it to create a slide for me as well, I can do that too. So create a slide at the end that addresses password reuse and cite your sources from the web. So now I've asked it to go out, make a slide that's related to this presentation. So here we go. made me a slide on password reuse. According to a survey by Google, 65% of people use the same password for multiple accounts. Pretty cool. You can use Copilot to modify slides, but I've found that it's too cumbersome. The modification part is too slow, but it's great for creation. So really useful. Any questions about PowerPoint or anything that we've covered so far? Cool. So now I want to move into then what I think is really the most useful use case for Copilot, and that's Teams meeting summaries and capturing data from meetings. So I'm going to go into, and I'm going to just blank this screen for just a minute because I've got way too much in my Teams. Trust me. And I'm going to go back to a meeting that we had as an account management team a while back. And I want to talk about a couple of things. Almost there. Okay, so let's go into here. So this is I think one of the coolest use cases. Okay, so here we have a meeting, account management training number 5. If you're in Microsoft Teams and you go into a meeting, you have chat from the meeting where there were links that were shared during the meeting. You have files that were shared related to the meeting, which could be a recording. You have the details for the meeting, which is going to show an agenda if you're using Microsoft Loop, which we could do a whole presentation on Microsoft Loop. It's a very powerful tool. We are using Microsoft Teams Premium at Teal. Teams Premium gives you the ability to do meeting recaps. Think of it kind of as Copilot Lite. Teams Premium uses really the same AI technology to capture and analyze a meeting transcript of a recorded meeting. So here, the recap will show who spent most of the time talking. You can see William spent a lot of time talking. It'll show you the general topics that were covered during the meeting. It'll break the meeting up into different chapters, and then it will give you some AI meeting notes from that meeting, including who said what, and it'll let you jump to different parts of the meeting. Now, this is pretty useful because it's using the AI to summarize the meeting and then generate follow-up tasks. But I've found that the meeting recap doesn't really pull enough information out of the meeting for it to be useful. I've found using Copilot is actually more useful than the meeting recap. So when I'm here looking at my meeting recap, I have my Copilot button in the upper right-hand corner. And when I open that Copilot tab, now I can ask questions about the meeting, which is really just a big text document in Microsoft's AI eyes, right? So I can ask it some questions. So I'm going to start with summarize the main points of the meeting. And when I do that, it's going to read through that meeting transcription, and it's going to generate a summary. And you can read some of the content that's here.
So does this mean you have to record the meeting in order to get this?
That's right. Yeah. So, and recording meetings is something that a lot of organizations feel nervous about because people are concerned about their words being on the record forever. So Microsoft has started to introduce a lot of different options for meeting recording. You can record a transcript of the meeting, but not the video, which a lot of people like. You can also enable Copilot so that people can use Copilot live during the meeting, but there's not a permanent record of the meeting. So there are more options that are coming out. The big one that is coming out now that we'll start seeing roll out is the requirement to consent to recording in Teams meetings. It's been a feature with Zoom for a very long time. Your meeting's being recorded, click OK. With Teams though, there's just a little record button at the top. Well, now they're introducing everyone has to consent before the recording will actually happen. And I think that's a direct response to what's happening with Copilot and kind of general concern about that. But you can see here from this summary that I asked for, now I have a nice kind of bulleted list of what was covered during the meeting, including citations of when those topics were mentioned. So I find that to be useful. Another prompt that is useful is the list action items prompt, where this will pull out what are the things that we need to do as a result of that meeting. And you'll notice, we'll let it do this here. It broke it up in a nice structured way, kind of with a category of each item and then what that item is, including where it was. When you compare it to the follow-up tasks that were drawn here, the wording is a little bit different. It's not showing citations, but the follow-up tasks will take you right to the section of the meeting where that occurred. So that's pretty useful. Another prompt that I think is useful is suggest follow-up questions based on the topics discussed. So this can help you think about, well, what should we talk about maybe at our next meeting related to this meeting? You could also ask questions like, what were the areas of disagreement in the meeting? What are some things that participants felt strongly about? That can help you zero in on parts of a longer meeting that you might want to follow up on. Let this one finish here. But by far, the feedback that the user community has provided around where is Copilot extremely useful and where is it not useful, the extremely useful category is the Teams meeting section. You'll notice in my agenda, I'm not covering Microsoft Excel. Sorry. It's really not there yet with Microsoft Excel. Someone that knows their way around Excel very well can create pivot tables and formulas kind of at the blink of an eye. The analysis that the AI can do on a spreadsheet is kind of, in my opinion, pretty surface level at this point. You can ask for outliers of the data set. You can ask for trends that are being seen. But in the testing that I've done, and a lot of the feedback that I've read, it's just not quite there yet. But I would encourage you to look at some of the YouTube videos and content that people are posting about that. William, you have a question?
I noticed that you were not in this meeting. It looks like the AI ability to deliver notes and stuff to people who might not have to watch the video.
That's a great softball question. Thank you. So Microsoft is actually releasing a meeting feature where you can follow a meeting where you get invited to it, but with the intention of not actually attending the meeting. So that way, when the meeting is going on and after the meeting occurs, like I didn't attend this meeting, I can just catch up on what decisions were made, what topics were discussed, and so forth. Yeah. And eventually, through automation, that stuff could be emailed to me, so I don't have to go seek it out from the system, but I'll get an email summary after the meeting occurs with any action items, as long as those action items don't have my name on them, right? As long as they're other people's action items. So those were some examples of using Copilot in some of the different applications that Microsoft offers. So next I want to go into talking about prompting. So Microsoft provides a framework for prompting the AI, and the prompt is really what you're asking it to do. A lot of what I typed in during the presentation was pretty short, and when you don't give the AI much, you're not going to get much back, or you're not going to get much back maybe that you're looking for. So Microsoft has created or recommends using a framework that really has 4 parts, where it talks about a goal, context, source, and expectations. The goal being, what do you want the AI to do? what's the context that you want it performed within, where do you want to surface the data from, and what are the expectations. So the more detail that you give the AI in the prompt, the better results you'll get from the AI. The other thing that I've learned along the way is the more detail that you give at the front of the prompt, the better. So put the things that are very important towards the front if you're making a really long prompt, because the things that you ask for towards the end may not be surfaced as part of the request. The other thing that is really important that I've found to focus on is make sure you're asking for what you want, including maybe specific examples, more so than what you don't want. Give it examples of what you want. Don't worry about what you don't want. Related to prompting, I want to show the Microsoft Copilot Lab website. So we'll pull that up here. Let me... So Copilot Lab is available from Microsoft, and it's really a prompt library, so to speak. So you can go to copilot.cloud.microsoft, and the Copilot Lab will show you examples of all sorts of different prompts that you can use to surface information from your tenant. You can go into all prompts, and they are sorted by application, or they're sorted by task. So we didn't talk about Excel, for example, but some examples that they give are setting up conditional formatting, comparing columns, highlighting data, getting counts of data, visualizing, and so forth. So the Copilot Lab is a great resource for identifying the different types of things you can ask Copilot. If we go back, we also didn't talk about Microsoft Outlook, and the reason we, oh, go ahead, you have a question.
So, I'm just trying to break this right. I know that it's not so great gleaning information from Excel, but what about putting it into Excel?
Like generating a sample data set. I haven't personally done that, but I've read that people are using Copilot or ChatGPT to generate sample data sets for doing analytics. What I've read about it hasn't been that it's necessarily good or bad. Have you had any experience with that in your class? A little bit?
A little bit, yeah. Actually, that's why I was asking, because it was going into, hey, you know, you have X, Y, and Z data, and put it in a pie chart for me.
Sure.
And that's great. Or put it in a spreadsheet, and this is the headers I'd love to use. And it works very well, actually. I was
cool.
Surprised.
Yeah, with the type of work that I do, I'm not creating data sets, but I've read that it's useful where you need to, you know, generate a bunch of randomized data for different purposes. Absolutely. Very cool. I was mentioning with Outlook that we didn't look at Outlook primarily because my email has a ton of sensitive stuff in it that I can't put up on the screen. But where I've used Copilot with Outlook is to help me summarize that long email thread that has been going on for days and days and days and days. Copilot really does a very good job of summarizing email and generating drafts. What hasn't worked for me is when I'm asking it to distill a bunch of information from a particular person. Copilot seems to only want to give 10 responses. And that's a known limitation that a lot of people are complaining about. If I'm asking it for, you know, tell me all the times William and I talked about going to Norseman. Well, it's only going to give me the first 10 that it finds, even though we may have talked about it in many other emails. So I think over time, Microsoft will expand some of those capabilities. Perhaps, yeah. Perhaps, yeah. Well, cool. So that is the content that I wanted to cover. Does anybody have any questions or anything they wanted to ask about before we do a drawing for a Copilot license, and then hop over to the tasting.
So if we're pulling stuff off the web, you have to give it a specific direction on where to go, or just by doing a good job with something that will go all the time.
Right. So I've found that the better detail you give it, the better it will do surfacing information. Behind the scenes, especially if you're using ChatGPT and some of the other AI tools, you can actually see how it's making queries, where it's going to Bing search, it's doing a search query based on the context of what you're asking, it's reading what's returned from that website, and then it's trying to surface it into what's returned by your prompt. I've had great success by using the AI and giving it a specific website that I want information from. So I've had scenarios that I've built where someone will release a blog, and I'll say, go to that blog, summarize it for me, and generate some questions that I could ask. And that is really useful. Yeah.
Worried about bad sites or outdated information.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. And that's where, when the data is returned, you want to look at what are the citations, because it could be surfacing data that is totally irrelevant to what you're asking.
You put that prompt where, like, give me all the information in the last month or something like that.
You probably could, but I'd still question, the sites that it's returning from. Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
How is it at generating custom images?
Yeah, we didn't get into that at all. It's actually pretty good. So I can go back to Copilot on the web, and just the other day I said, create an image of a boy looking at an airplane. Why did I ask that? I'm training to become a pilot, so flying is really interesting to me. The prompt that I gave it right there was pretty simple and pretty short, so I have no idea what it's going to return. Let's see, maybe it's going to be a jet, maybe it's going to be a boy looking up at the sky, maybe it's going to be, yep, there we go. Okay, so let's make that a little bit better. Change the airplane, so it is a Cessna 172. Let's see. I've used this personally to create images for different purposes internally, and then also for social media posts. So there you go. Sure.
Create image of dog and human shaking.
Like shaking hand, shaking paw. Let's just say shaking and see what it does. If they're shivering or if they're actually, yeah. But that goes back to that prompt engineering, right? What we're asking is really very short.
I'm just curious based on, what I do if there's a.
Let's see.
What the difference? Oh, dang.
Not bad. Kind of cool. So yeah, I mean the photorealism of some of the images is pretty cool. I've used this a lot internally and also with external things that we've done. Nick, do you mind pulling the bag and doing the?
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just FYI, when I did that in the various Google places, I can't do that.
Sure.
Can't generate pictures of people, but we're working on it.
Yep.
And finally, after about half hour, 45 minutes, I just gave up.
Yep.
Oh, and one, I did get a dog, but it was more like a 4-year-old drawing of Snoopy.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that goes back to the prompt engineering, that the more detail you give it about what you're looking for, the better type of response. So yeah, thank you for that question. So the last part of our schedule here is to give away a 1-year Copilot license for one user. So Nick, you've got names in that bag.
You got John Anderson.
There you go. So personally or at Actify. Maybe personally give it to you. So we'll get to that later. Cool. So thanks everybody for attending today. This was the first event that we did here at Norseman. And I'll make a decision on whether or not we want to come back after tasting the spirits. I think that's the best. So